So we are the Church of Horror, and apropos of today's Godless sermon, it's going to have to be a road sermon because I ran into a car accident on the highway, and luckily it was not one that I was in any way involved in, other than my being stuck for a long ass time. But honestly, I was probably going to be late anyways. I was going to totally resign to it. Hello. We have the Church of Horror. When we do road sermons, it's not as good because we don't get to do music. And for some reason, StreamYard still doesn't know how to do music from phones. Yeah, we could complain about it. But so I had a shitty day today. Anybody else? Started out really shitty. Didn't rest very well. I could bitch, but I'm not going to because the sun's going down. I want to show you. Sometimes we do this at the Church of Horror. I do a road sermon. Chances are I pulled over someplace where there's a beautiful sunset happening. And look at that. I mean, I'm still pissed. But pissed with a view. Look at that. I mean, be pissed, but enjoy the view. That's what I say. That's what I say. That's what I say to you, my friend. So, we are a spiritual community for godless people. We are called the Church of Horror. We normally would sing a hymn. I don't sing particularly well yet. We'll see. I've been thinking about learning to play the guitar, actually. If I can play the guitar, if I learn how to play the guitar, I will sing. I will do it. I'll do both. Until then, though, no, probably not. In a moment here, that sun is going to be gone, so I'm going to go ahead and turn on the light. Luckily, I have a little lamp that I can use, and then when it runs out of juice, or I run out of juice, then the sermonizing is over. So, oh, no sound. Did anybody hear me? You hear me? Type yes, I hear you. Type. Okay. A Ross has sound. MB? Okay. Thank you. Thanks for telling me. You always have to be careful with MB. Okay, because MB likes to make jokes. We love MB, but she likes to make a prank. I'm gonna see if I can find my water. You ever go on road trips and buy like 5 waters and you can never find them? And I made the mistake of opening up a Dasani water like after 2 days it had been in the sun. Oh my God. I think this is like a day old, this one. Hello. Let's talk about pessimism and having bad days. Because I was texting with my partner this morning, my partner Winter. And I said, oh, interesting. Oh, is sneezing fit? Oh. I drove past a car accident just a moment ago. And I was like, yeah, this might as well happen. You know how sometimes it's just like that? You're just like, yeah, this might as well happen. And I was driving past it, and I remember as I was cresting up over the hill and coming down into the valley, I guess you'll say. This is Beaver. Officially, I made it to Beaver, Utah, on my way back to St. George. And I just knew going up over that mountain, I'm like, an earlier me would be panicking about, I have sermon at 8. I'm not going to make it. I'm not dressed for sermon. I'm not, I'm letting the quality slip. I'm letting the blah, blah, blah. I would be panicking right now. And that's part of how I am definitely, I feel like I'm definitely making progress. And that's strange because I don't want to set my own standards on my mental health and my behavioral improvements. Let's not call them improvements. And in fact, let's call it change. Okay. That I can change. That part of it is, I would have been freaking out. Like, why can't they get this thing moving? Why aren't these cops do a better job? I'd be throwing blame all over the place. And I just wasn't. I was just chill. And I was just like, okay, I'm going to pull up StreamYard on my phone while I'm stopped. Only while I was stopped. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to text everybody, say, I'm going to be about 10 minutes late. There's an accident on the highway. Yes, I'm safe. And then, and if, and then it probably will all come to naught, and I'll probably just I was having a bad day anyway, so fuck it. And I remember, and that filled me with such relief that I could say, okay, it freed me up to say, wow, this really is a serious backup. Somebody must really be hurt. And then I crested up over the hill there. And I'm not a rubbernecker. I don't like to, let me see the trauma. It was bad. It was a car that, how should I describe it? The roof was gone. The windshield was gone. Half of the car was gone. I don't know if they use the jaws of life to pry it open like a can and pull people out of it. But I mean, just looking at it, I just seeing what was left where the seats were. I went, oh my gosh, I'd be startled if there was anybody left alive in that car. And I was coming over and thinking, if I were panicked right now about time, or about people's impression of me, or about professionalism, I wouldn't even be appreciating right now that, wow, somebody probably lost their life right here, right now, right where I am. And that's kind of apropos of, I'm going to stop using that term, of where I'm going with this today. I wish I could bring up images. Maybe I can bring it up in the background. Because I got a picture I wanted to share. And I put it on my phone. I don't think I can do anything with it, though. Did I put a background? Oh, here's a background. Hold on. I want to show you guys something. If I can make this work, great. More add files. Photos. This might work. Okay. StreamYard sucks, man. Anyways, I found a picture of John Aaron. I want to tell you, so if you like space movies like I do, and I know it's another space analogy. We'll do the space analogy real fast, and then we'll get into some more real life stuff. If you like space movies like I do, you may have heard this term. It's used in Apollo 13, and it's used in The Martian. I'm sure it's used in other ones, probably in The Right Stuff. Where you'll see one character turns to another one and says, "You are a steely-eyed missile man." In fact, I've been thinking personally about making a series about my grandfather's company and the secrets that happened at the company he worked for in northern Utah, particularly, but that also had to do with down here in southern Utah with the polygamist, by the way, which was a company called Morton Thiokol. My grandpa did I mention before, as I shall mention, obviously again, that my grandfather made a rocket fuel. And hey, Lisa's here. We're gonna get this party started. And my grandfather made rocket fuel for the Minuteman missile, which became the rocket boosters. And so, of course, inside the aerospace industry, there's all these little jokes about missiles and rockets that, everything is, just a missile with a sardine can of men at the top of it or what have you, right? I was pondering recently about this because, and thinking about making a series just about all the stories that get percolated around in Utah about the aerospace industry. In fact, I've been talking to Tim Rathbone, who worked for Lockheed Martin, I think, once upon a time, and has good stories on that. And the more I talk to him, I talk to my dad, I talk to other people whose parents and grandparents worked in the aerospace industry, find out while our grandparents and parents weren't supposed to talk about the space industry, talk about their work because it was all a national secret, they all did it. And I'm like, we should get all these freaking stories together. So I started looking into it. Anyways, I'm going to get to that. That's in a minute here. But there was this, you'll hear this phrase that people will use. By the way, so that's why I decided, you know what we ought to have? We ought to have a podcast series called Steely-Eyed Missile Mormons, because so many people in the Mormon world here were involved in the space race and in the Cold War. Like the Cold War built this state, frankly. I mean, eventually natural gas became a big part of it, and then the technology with like Novell and Oracle and all that, and Microsoft. But really, it was aerospace that built. Mormons built up the Mormon Church. It was Howard Hughes, and it was aerospace. And the polygamists are like neck deep in it, by the way. That's a big part of how the polygamists got their money. Anyway, so I just thought that would be an interesting story. This term, the steely-eyed missile man, is a compliment that was used in NASA, and especially in the Houston flight control, where there was this moment where a young man by the name of John Aaron was 24 years old, and he was the head of ECOM, in charge of electronics and consumables for the Apollo missions. He was also the Gemini missions, at least some of the Gemini missions. And he was only 24 years old when Apollo 12 went up. So this is the second mission to go to the moon. And he's the head of ECOM. And there was a moment about little more than 30 seconds into the launch where lightning struck the Saturn V and sent all of the telemetry, all of the math on which way the rocket was pointing, where it was going, sent it all into a tailspin, made it kind of just like cycle around, and to where it was completely unusable. And that lightning strike was so devastating, even though it was a simple thing. I mean, structurally, rocket was fine. But because it made that telemetry equipment basically start to fritz out, the flight director was on the verge of pulling the abort and aborting that launch. And he decided not to when this 24-year-old kid, John Aaron, got on the radio, got on Vox and said, try switching, try SCE to aux. And without thinking about it, and this is just a matter of seconds, the telemetry went haywire. Vox, this is John Aaron, 24-year-old boy, says try SCE to aux. And they just did it because they'd worked out this communication, they worked out this trust. They know, in these split second decisions, if you know how to trust the person next to you, that they know what they're talking about, you can actually save lives. And so they did. They switched the something computing electronics, the SCE. I forget what it was, but it was the telemetry readout. They switched it to aux, and the telemetry fixed itself. The signal fixed itself because basically they'd just switched it over, as I understand, basically to minimum required power. And by doing that, they were able to, from Houston, I believe, or maybe they were telling them to do it in the capsule, but I'm pretty sure they're doing it on, I don't know. Anyways, they switched it. And in that instant, he saved that entire mission because they were seriously about to, in a matter of seconds, they were ready to pull the abort and try and get those astronauts out of that rocket and get them home again. And that Apollo 12 went on to be the second mission to land on the moon. He saved that mission. After the end of that mission, the flight director had paid him the compliment and said, "Man, John Aaron, you are a steely-eyed missile man." You'll hear it again in Apollo 13. because he was also one of, I think he was the econ director at Apollo 13 for the Apollo 13 mission. But you also see him, if my understanding is correct, he's also the guy who's working with Ken Mattingly inside the simulator when they were trying to figure out how to make the entire spaceship fly on 12 amps. And they had to come up and figure out with all the ways that, how do we get enough power back and forth between the LEM and the command module. And then you hear it again. It was actually two different characters who one of them says to the other, it's like, "You are a steely-eyed missile man." But that is apparently like a thing that they say in the space program. And it all came down to one guy who was so used to seeing funny numbers. John Aaron, this wasn't a normal protocol. They didn't have an established protocol for what happens if lightning strikes the rocket while it's launching. Nobody thought to run that scenario, right? And but he had seen in other moments where electricity shorted out somewhere on the rocket, seen that same pattern where everything went haywire, where all the telemetry data went haywire. And in those moments, just kind of playing around with it on his own recognizance, on his own time, out of his own interest and out of his own challenging to himself and saying, I bet you anything one day this is going to happen to me. And with my luck, it'll be in the middle of a launch. And they'll end up having to either abort the whole mission or I'll end up getting an astronaut killed or something. And in that moment, I'm going to need to know that, you just switch it to aux. Oh, if you just switch the SEC to aux, it corrects itself. And when that moment happened, he didn't have to think about it. Yep. Try switching SCE to aux. And he saved that mission. I was thinking about that at the same time I was thinking about this story about my grandpa. And my grandpa made rocket fuel for the Minuteman missile, but then he retired. And then we had way too many missiles. But the same company, Morton Thiokol, started to make rocket boosters for the space shuttle program. And they're still using them today. In fact, it was those rocket boosters that took Artemis 2 to the moon just a few weeks ago. Now, they weren't built by Morton Thiokol. Morton Thiokol has been folded into, Northrop Grumman. But I can't help but marvel at that and look and say, my grandpa worked on that fuel. It didn't invent it or anything. He was just in charge of the technical side of making it, and nearly got himself killed once. I think I've told that story before, more than once. I can imagine, but once it earned him the nickname Sparky Rollins. I recently learned that, and but they're still using that system. And I've been looking at like how they're testing out bigger and more powerful rockets with SpaceX, and I have my qualms about that. I mean, it's exciting, but at the same time, I'm just like, I don't get it, man. We got a system that works. Maybe I'm partial, maybe I'm maybe I'm biased, but I like Grandpa's program. No, I've always loved it. Well, no, I've pretty much always loved the SLS since what do we call it? Space lift system or shuttle lift system. It used to be shuttle lift system, now it's space lift system, I think. Anyways, the SLS. I'm in love with the SLS. I think it works, and frankly, nothing else works quite. Nothing has the track record. Nothing else has the power. And I have to marvel at those launches and look at it and say, I remember when I first saw one of these launches and was not impressed. Had no idea my grandfather had made those rockets because it was a government secret. We weren't supposed to talk about it. And Brian Honeycutt. Oh, I'd love to talk to you about that. That's cool. I've been going through names. I'd love to just get all these names of these people who were involved in all these things. But anyways, I remember the first rocket launch that I watched was in 1986. It was the Challenger. And I had no idea people all around me were involved in the disaster, in the Challenger disaster. And Tim and I talked about this, and you bring it up in the aerospace people who worked in the industry back then. Remember how the Rogers Commission started hunting down all the people involved and in screwing up this in this fatal mistake that damn near ended the shuttle program, frankly. They were scared of the look it was giving the world. They were afraid that the Soviets, again, the idea that that they had beaten us in space. Just make sure that this isn't an emergency. Cool. And you guys still hear me? And the and they were, but more than anything else, Americans were traumatized because that was the space flight where the president of the United States had run for a second term on that the shuttle, on the promise that the space shuttle was going to be like a truck for outer space, and that it was going to kickstart a new era of commercialization of space. And that president, of course, was Ronald Reagan. And part of making it so that the space shuttle, making it clear the space shuttle was a business venture, not just a government operation, was that they were going to incorporate more services into the shuttle program. And so they came up with this idea, the Reagan administration, that we should have a teacher go up into space. We should select somebody who's not part of the NASA space program, somebody who's not an astronaut, an ordinary person, an ordinary looking person who was approachable and who was endearing, and send that person up into space and have all the school children in America learn a couple of lessons, 2 lessons from this teacher in space who, they had 140 applicants, and President Reagan personally selected one. McAuliffe was her name. And what was it? Sharon McAuliffe, I want to say. And she was just about the most normal looking person you can imagine. You looked at this person and said, yep, that's a school teacher. That's a school teacher right there. That's everybody's 3rd grade science teacher, right? Whatever. And so she said, she used to joke, she's like, I don't think any teacher has practiced these two lessons more than I have. She said, but I'm ready. I'm ready to do these from the space shuttle live on television with all of America's children. And so they had to launch it. But it was part of President Reagan's ambition to get this, to have the school kids learn a lesson from space. And then he wanted to brag about it at his State of the Union address, which was on January 29th, if I'm not mistaken, which means that on January 27th was the last school day where kids were in school. And so they had to launch it. And so they pushed the date back that January, it got colder and colder and colder. And but they were determined not to scrub the launch and not to delay it. And so unless it was absolutely critical that they canceled the launch or that they postponed the launch, there was a lot of pressure at every level of the government to say, do not pull the plug, do not get in the way, do not cause any disturbance whatsoever unless it's absolutely mission critical. And so when they and so there were so many aspects of safety that were overlooked, so many instances where it was like, is it mission critical? Is it Krista McCall? Thank you. and it's MCAULIFFE, I think. And they got that the temperature got down below freezing. They actually have photos you can find now where the underside of the platform, all the equipment is coated in ice, has like long icicles off the bottom of it. And time again, Morton Thiokol, who had designed the gaskets for the rings, the O-rings that go that connected the different pieces of these missiles or these rocket boosters on sides, the solid rocket boosters, had warned, do not push a launch on these rocket boosters when it gets below, I think the official temperature was like 44 degrees or something. So 40 something degrees Fahrenheit. If it gets below that, you got to scrub the launch. Scrub the launch. Send the SRBs back. We got to replace them because those ones, the O-rings, they'll harden at that temperature. They will harden, and if they harden, what'll happen is they won't return to their elasticity, their normal elasticity. Well, they knew that at the point where you actually launch the rocket, where you ignite the rocket, it gets so hot that those O-rings, if the fuel spilled over to where the O-rings were, and it would actually melt them. And if they melted, well, then that became like a layer of protection, and they would melt just long enough, and in that place to protect a second layer of the O-rings on the bottom side. And in theory, that should buy you enough seconds that if the fuel's going to start pouring out the side of the fuselage of the rocket instead of through the engine, that hopefully it will be after the separation. But then that night before the launch, it got down to like 31 degrees, I want to say. That's freezing. That's no recovery whatsoever. And there are stories in Utah here of people who knew the men who called NASA and called Houston and called Washington, and the meetings. They had a meeting, I recently learned, in a hotel room in Houston with Morton Thiokol's people and I think Hydropac. I don't know that Hydropac's people were there. It turns out that the O-ring itself, the O-rings were manufactured by a company called Hydropac, which previously had been Utah Tool and Die, which I understand was, and I'm still doing my research on this, was owned by Rulon Jeffs, the head of the FLDS polygamist group. And so, anyways, and so he apparently sold out his shares and when it became Hydropac so that they could get government contracts. But who knows? I don't know that there's any establishing. I don't know if there's any actual published record about how many polygamists were still involved in that company when it started getting assignments from Morton Thiokol to take runoff work from them. And one of the things they did was to make these O-rings. And there were all kinds of manufacturing quality problems with the O-rings, in addition to their fundamental design flaw, if they were going to launch them in sub-freezing temperatures. Which Morton Thiokol had warned the NASA, don't be launching these after they freeze. And there are these men who were involved in this launch who called day after day and had meetings, closed-door meetings, with top brass leaders in these companies, in these private companies, and at NASA, saying, please, look, say what you have to say and tell us if we have to scrub the launch, But if we don't have to, just shut up. Because right now it's a matter of political importance. I don't think that there was any way in the pressure that these people were under and the pressure they were allowing themselves to be put under, the panic that they were allowing themselves to get put under, allowing themselves to fall into, to appreciate how Americans had connected with, in the process, had connected with this crew, and especially with Krista McAuliffe. And so when it launched and that disaster happened, the psychological wound on America was so bad that they nearly scrubbed the shuttle program altogether, which was catastrophic because that was how we were getting Hubble. We wouldn't have had Hubble. Hopefully you guys can still hear me. My data is fluctuating. I'm on LTE now. I guess it's rush hour. In any event, I know that I do a lot of like weird space analogies and movie analogies and things. This is where I'm getting to. I look at my own life and I look at how often I am called upon to impart a little wisdom to people from my own personal experience. And it's very humbling to realize how little of my personal experience really lends any special credibility into anybody else's life. And so when I have a personal experience that helps me to relate to somebody else and helps me to really make better decisions and to advise somebody else, I kind of marvel because I've always thought of myself as being kind of an exception to every rule. But one thing that I have found consistently in life is that the years and years and years that I was depressed and thought to myself, it's not that I'm depressed, it's that life sucks. And I'm the only person around me that's willing to be honest about it. And it seemed so clear at the time. And I would develop this very dark sense of humor. And I even had this mantra that was extremely dark. I mean, ridiculously dark now that I look back on it. I haven't done it in a long time. But there were years there where I used to say over and over again, repeating back in feedback, like a feedback loop into my brain, saying, you're born in blood and piss and shit, and it all gets worse steadily. Then you fucking die. And I would say it over and over again, all day long. No comprehension, no appreciation for how, even when I thought I was the only one around, I was the only one who could hear me when I was doing it, there were other people who heard it and were very concerned about it. But for me, it was coping. It was a dark thing I could say that felt so abrupt and honest that it made me feel better. And it became this relief valve. It set my expectations for everything that was going to happen next, and then nothing caught me by surprise. And then when, I had nothing but problems at work, I'd say, well, you're born blood and piss and shit. Then it gets steadily worse until you fucking die. Then when I had marital problems, blood and piss, when my kids were having trouble at school, what you born blood and piss and shit. It's worse than you fucking die. And then, it just became my everyday expectation. And while people around me, including my now ex, saw it as, well, you're really negative and pessimistic. And I remember thinking, oh, they think I'm just being depressed and then just wallowing in it, pitying myself. But the truth is, it made me feel better in an instant, and then I didn't need it anymore. It was a thing I had to say or a thing I had to do. It was a feeling I had to have, an experience I had to have that reset my expectations. And then honestly, I felt much better. It wasn't about making myself feel worse. It was about making myself feel better. It was a remedy, not self-inflicted. And well, and then of course it also was kind of a spiraling thing. As I came to appreciate in partners, friends, people I met online, I came to, and especially as I met other people who were depressed like I was, that, sometimes we all have these little things that we say to try and make ourselves feel better in the moment by just engaging in dark humor. Make some really, really inappropriate joke, or something, or make some throw out some throwaway line about how, we're probably better off if none of us had even been born, blah blah blah, or something, and just to have that moment of levity, a meme, the dark memes. Oh man, there were days where the dark memes saved me. To be able to look at our life in the moment and say, right now I'm just going to go into it expecting that it's all going to end in tears, is not just a perfectly viable and healthy habit to get into in a modern day. It is one of the most ancient of philosophies. It's Stoicism at the end of the day. And I remember listening. I was reading the book Religion for Atheists by Alain de Botton. If you don't know, Alain de Botton he's a brilliant pessimistic philosopher, and he said he would go around, he would promote the book, and he would use this quote in the book, and it's a quote by Seneca, the Roman Stoic, and it says, "What use is it in weeping over the parts of life? The whole of it calls for tears." And I remember hearing it for the first time. I remember hearing Alain de Botton, one of my heroes, saying that and then laughing at it for himself. And the relief that washed over me. I was like, oh gosh. Yes, that's the thing I've been saying. Sometimes you just got to say something dark and just throw that dark humor out there that makes you go, why does that feel so much better to just get that out there? Just let that roll off the tongue. And realize that's because it's kind of true and nobody says it. And while people are setting themselves up to fail all the time by being hopeful, and then it's like it clicked. Pessimism really clicked in my head in a way that it hadn't done even when reading Schopenhauer. And that's that. Sometimes in life, especially if you get really angry, sometimes that anger is a reaction to completely unrealistic hope. And while so much of the human experience seems sometimes like you can't possibly get enough hopium, right? Oof, that's bright on the disorientation like this. How's that? Better? Well, it seems like, you can't possibly have too much hope. I got into a TikTok argument with this once. I said, with some Christians and Christian/conservatives, hardcore Trumpers, back in the days when I used to do my toxic political arguing bullshit. That was a total waste of time, but made me feel better. And I said, did it ever occur to you guys? Does it ever occur to you that you should look in yourselves for toxic positivity? And they all said, there's no such thing. And I never forget one time I was done arguing about being right. I mean, I thought I'd made it clear that I was right, and I was like, this is now getting boring. I was thinking about signing off of the argument when I said, "Can I ask you something? Do you guys really think that I just said that to you to make you feel bad, or to make you feel, or to criticize you or poke fun at you? Because that's not what I was saying. When I'm curious, do you ever think about toxic positivity?" And they again would defend themselves and get defensive about it. They couldn't stop arguing. And I thought, I'm trying to help some people here. And they don't want it. So maybe I'll stop. And I did. And in fact, not long after that, I stopped it altogether. Stopped arguing with strangers on the internet altogether. And recently I'm tried to start it back up again, but in a completely new way, but we'll talk about that. And I remember that moment thinking, toxic positivity makes people so angry. And that's part of the reason why we have such stupidly over polarized political arguments, and people throwing out accusations at each other are the most stupid, heinous, awful things that people say to each other in political conversations. And it's like, okay, you don't have to go there. We can talk about the topic without you accusing somebody of being, fill in the blank. And it's like, can we not have a conversation in a civil way? And I realized this toxic positivity thing is the whole thing. And it's not just politics. It's in our work. It's in our parenting. It's in the standards we set for ourselves in our grooming and our grooming as in your appearance, hygiene. It's in how we think about science. It's in how we think about, it's this perfectionism that says everybody is an adult who is over 18. And so you all are doing A, B, C, and D. And before you get to D, you definitely have said at least 3 things that not everybody does, that not every adult does. And of course it's going to be shocking to one person what's not shocking to another person. It's surprising, I find, when in conversations where I'll say, how many people in this room would say every adult in the world brushes their teeth twice a day? And to see in a group of 4 or 5 people, see people turn on each other when they go, "What? Why didn't you just raise your hands? What kind of disgusting animal are you?" I'm an ADHD monster, I guess. Or, name some other habit or lack of habit. Name anything that you would say, "Oh, every adult does this. Every adult pays their taxes on time." Are you kidding me? Do you know how many people don't pay their taxes on time? Do you know how many people file their taxes 2, 3, 4 months late every year? Everybody pays their credit card bill and pays more than the principal. Are you kidding me? Do you know how much credit card debt Americans are in? No, they do not. They do not. And there's so many things, and it's little things sometimes. I'll give you one. And sometimes it's nice to just hear somebody else's, right? And or even find one that you share. I think I may have said this one before, and I'm going to get lots of heat for it, right? I don't like to wear washed socks. I don't like it. I don't like to wear dirty socks. Don't mind you. No, I didn't say that. I buy a brand new pack of socks, and it is like one of the most hypocritical things that I do. It's not that expensive, but it's too expensive to be practical. It's not clean. It is totally clean, but it's not eco-friendly. It's exploitative. Frankly, there's really no way to buy, as I understand, there's no way to buy cotton products in America without exploiting slave labor. They say the same thing about chocolate. There's no such thing as American chocolate products, or most chocolate products in most of the world, that weren't made with slave labor at some point. So it's like, and rubber, natural latex rubber, same situation. So, so you have these, you know, we all have these little foibles, these little things that if we were to sit there and just talk them all out, everybody say all the ways in which you know, other people may expect that all adults are doing this and we're all being responsible all the time. If we were to sit here and talk about all the ways, being honest and blunt in all the ways in which we don't, each of us individually, it would shock us to realize these standards of what it means to be a grown-up are just heinously false. They are mythology. And it's especially hurtful to our young people. And how many people, Gen Z and younger, will tell you at some point or another, well, hopefully this guy doesn't want me to move. You need me to move, guy? Will tell you at some point or another, I guess I'm such a shitty person. Every person in the world knows how to get their laundry done every single week except for me. I mean, maybe some of you have had this, especially those of you who are parents or older siblings. Have you had the experience yet of having to explain to a young person, I know it seems that way. I know that we all paint it that way, but it's just not true. Or everybody knows how to write in cursive except for me. Everybody knows how to, and everybody knows how to deal with anxiety. Or nobody else has to deal with anxiety attacks. Nobody else has to deal with panic attacks. Nobody else finds it impossible to go to sleep at night. And it's like to try to explain to a young person who looks at the, like we did once upon a time and are often tempted to do, to look at the world and say, everybody's got this figured out, except for me. I just suck. I'm such a useless piece of shit. And get down on ourselves. And when we get down on ourselves, here's the funny thing that happens. Your nervous system doesn't really understand the difference between an attack from the outside of your body and an attack from the inside of your body. And when you induce your anxiety, it's really not that different from when somebody else induces your anxiety. So when you've already spent time today, or in the last hour, in the last couple of hours, and you've spent, or in the last week, and you spent time building up and building up and building up and building up self-criticism, self-criticism, self-criticism. Everybody gets it except for me. Everybody gets it except for me. Everybody gets it except for me. Then your body gets on this, your whole nervous system gets in this fight, flight, fawn, freeze, or fugues, reaction. And nobody's, generally speaking, no two people are going to react exactly the same to the same kind of pressure and amount of pressure. A lot of that depends on trauma. A lot of that depends on how your nervous system works. A lot of that depends on a lot of other factors like diet and exercise. But we all have them, these reactions when our body defends itself and our brain defends itself, and we lash out when we get angry. And it all tracks back to this toxic positivity thing that we set up for the sake of feeling secure, feeling superior, whatever it may be. We get this idea in our heads and we perpetuate to ourselves and to other people that in our community, in our group, or, whether that is your generation, we Gen Xers, or we baby boomers, or we Gen Y people, or we white people, or we people of color, or we gay people, we trans people. We do these things, and and nobody else does it. You can bring politics into it. We liberals, we all understand and do this thing, and those conservatives, they don't do it, and the conservatives do the same thing, and we all do this, right? And we start setting up this is what a decent human being does and how a decent human being behaves, and set it up, and we start to virtue signal to each other that I'm doing this, I'm doing all of this, and you should be doing this too. I'm startled that you're not doing this. You should be more like me. You should be more like people. You should be more like people like great virtuous leaders in history like John F. Kennedy. Do you know how vile a person John F. Kennedy could be? Great leader? Sure. Brilliant man? Yes. Loyal husband and father? No, wait a minute. Hold up now. Dutiful and obedient Catholic? Oh, no. Understanding man of the people? Nope. Brilliant advocate for workers' rights? Not really. He was a man. He was a flawed human being. And was he better than Nixon? Yeah, by a long shot. But frankly, people forget how much better Nixon was than pretty much than most people we have in office right now, with all of his bad behaviors. But it's not just a matter of protecting ourselves from our own behavior and our own toxic positivity and from our own hateful behaviors. It's also about protecting ourselves from the constant onslaught of of threats to our person, threats to our families, threats to our safety and to our community. So much of what divides us as people comes down to the very basic, very natural, and completely virtuous need to protect our own. And when we start to turn our minds and our feelings and our awareness inward into phrases like, all I care about are me and mine. Not my circus, not my monkeys. I don't want, I don't care. I don't have room for any of that that's going on in the world. All I can care about is right here and now with me and my people. None of these things are bad. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying the more that we turn inwardly like that and cannot abide just sitting in the controversy, sitting in the badness of life with all of these other things happening around us, because we feel overwhelmed. And so we retreat into ourselves. When we do that and separate from other people and from our awareness of what's going on in the rest of the world, for whatever reason, we start to separate inwardly from our own feelings. And the more I learn from people who are smarter than me, the more I hear this again and again. Our disconnectedness to other people and our willingness to isolate from other people and from a consciousness of their suffering makes us feel separated from a consciousness of ourselves. And when we have that difference, that disconnectedness from ourselves, especially when it comes to men, but not exclusively men, when we have that disconnectedness to ourselves, it comes out as anger. And when this dawned on me, I thought to myself, why am I not talking about this every day? Why am I not talking about this with every man I come across? Why aren't we as men talking about this? What would I even say? How would I make it shorter? How would I make it faster? You know me, I like to ramble. And so I think to myself frequently, and sometimes I'll even write it down. I usually pull up my Google Docs and I have like 1 billion notes and documents barely started in there. ADHD all over the place. I'm doing it right now. And then I'll rehearse it throughout the day and try to think when would be an appropriate moment to say to a man, so that we as men can help each other. We must do it. If we don't do it, this will continue to perpetuate, especially when we do it around children. The fact that we as men can be so toxic in our anger around women is so it's so it's so tragic in and of itself. But when we do it around children, and when we do this to children, frankly, it really cannot be anything short of abuse. And it took me years to realize that. And to hear how many people around me all the time were pleading with me, as well as with all the men in our community, please, 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 you men need to step up and talk to each other because you don't hear us. I remember thinking when the first time that I mentioned, I heard you say something before about we men need to, it was again, it was back in the days when Kate Kelly and I were having regular conversations on Facebook. I said, you said something really struck me, Kate, about men need to talk to each other because so many of us don't hear what women are saying. And she was like, thanks, Joe. I'm like, okay. I don't mean to insinuate that Kate and I were particularly close, but we knew each other's names and we talked. She knew my name. And we did have conversations in person too. And good. Hopefully in a good way, Lisa. But at that moment, it was like every woman in my life came out of the woodwork with, yeah, how long have I been trying to say this to you? You've never said that to me. To my wife. You've never said that to me. And she's like, I have so said that to you. I'm like, did you phrase it the way Kate Kelly said it? She's like, don't say that. Don't say Kate Kelly. Don't say it like that. I'm like, well, we're just friends. We're just friends. So it's cool. And and it was a real paradigm shift, and it made me feel really shitty. Made me feel really bad about myself. It's like, have I just been ignoring? How could I be ignoring something that people have been saying around me and not even realize I've been ignoring it? Don't you have to choose to ignore something? Nope. Could be ignoring it all the time. And not realize it, not even realize it, because you think, oh, they're talking about other men. Oh, they're talking about somebody. Oh, they're talking about that guy over there. Who's she talking about? She's talking about you, dude. She's talking about you. What, me? No, I'm Joe. I'm one of the good ones. Who's this toxic man she's talking about? Yeah, you toxic men should talk to each other. You bunch of pieces of shit. Get your shit in order. What's she talking to? What is she talking about? She's talking about me. And how many times I think to myself during the course of the day, would I have the courage to say it and then just look at somebody and just wait? I said it. I said what I said. And a phrase like, it's not that we don't have a right to get angry. You have a right to be angry. But did you make yourself angry? Does it occur to you that you made yourself angry? Because I did. I didn't know it for years, man. And maybe you can soften it, make it more approachable. Make it about myself, maybe. Say, man, do you know what an angry guy I am? Most people who know me don't think of me as an angry person. I've gotten really good at masking that. And so it's shocking when people find it. I'm a very angry person. But when I choose to reveal to somebody, especially to other men, not by showing them anger, because that's not productive, then showing people anger makes them feel defensive. And when people feel defensive, They don't feel receptive. They close off. And so, and to be able to say to men, to friends of mine, say, I had no idea how angry I was and how much of my anger was completely unnecessary. How much of it was stupid hurt that I was causing myself. And I feel so badly about it. It makes me feel guilty. It really does. I don't want to be that guy anymore. And it's hard. It's a daily struggle. But sometimes it can become so easy when I realize one simple thing, a simple thing that just changed it all for all around for me and made my anger so much easier to control. Do you want to know what it is? If anything I do or say comes from a place of defensiveness, I just hold on to it for a moment and I just don't do it. Instead of getting defensive, I sit with it for a minute and ask myself, is anybody here capable of hurting me and wanting to hurt me, really? Is there anybody here who's capable of hurting me and wants to hurt me? When you realize that the answer is no, it's so easy to not be defensive. And in that moment, you don't have to say that thing. You don't have to say that thing. You don't have to rise up in your own defense. Even if somebody accuses you of something that's false, getting angry by responding to it with some explanation, defensive explanation about the way things should be, or how this is not fair, or how nobody's being fair to me. This always happens to me. In that moment, even if you are right, by just triggering everybody around you so that they do the thing you don't, I had learned to ignore all my life, or just never. Maybe I didn't learn to ignore it. Maybe I just never knew that it existed. Maybe I never paid attention to it, that it happened. That there were things and moments where, with the tone of my voice, or with the language that I used, or with the posturing that I used, and nobody answered, nobody responded. I took it as a tacit endorsement of everything I had said. There, I said it. I said the thing that needed to be said, and everybody agrees with me, and I move on. And what had happened was, instead, I had triggered a fawn response in 2, 3, 4 people at the same time. They weren't agreeing with me. They were afraid of me. And when I knew to recognize that better, it terrified me. I know people know that I'm not an angry guy. People don't think of me like I'm an angry guy. People think of me as like a nice guy. I'm a cool guy. I'm funny. I'm charismatic. I'm charming. I don't always comb my hair very well. I usually have some schmutz in my beard from something I laid my head on somewhere. But other than that, I'm an approachable guy. People like me for that reason, right? Yeah, sure. And generally true. But then there were moments where I made people afraid. And I would ask. And suddenly I had a thing. I had a project to work on myself. And I started to ask women, do I frighten you sometimes? Yeah. I'd ask women I worked with, do you mind if I ask you a question? Do I say or do things that frighten you? And they'd get, one or two would say, no, you, Joe? No. But women I worked with regularly, you do sometimes. Sometimes you say some scary things. And I'd say, well, okay. And there it is again. That moment that goes, okay, I feel defensive. I feel attacked. Is this person, did I not ask this person to share with me the answer to this question? Is this person capable of hurting me? Maybe. Is this person wanting to hurt me? No. All right. Then if it's true, and I learned this through experience, if it's true that other people recognize when I'm trying to do better, and when I try to be a good person, and when I try to be aware of other people around me and to protect other people from feeling afraid rather than making them feel afraid. If that is true, I don't have to explain it to anyone. If I have to explain it to somebody, then I probably am not doing that. I'm probably not doing very good at it. And if more men understood that, do you have, I mean, can you sit with me for a moment and just fantasize for a second? A world where more men understood that. How many things would be different right now? I can tell you this right now. I'm going to say a thing. I'm not saying it to make somebody feel bad about themselves, and I'm not saying it to endorse any behavior other than just being aware of other people and their feelings and deconstructing toxic masculinity. I am convinced that Turning Point USA would not exist if Charlie Kirk had understood this. And while it does not break my heart that this man is out of the world, it does break my heart to think of his family being without a husband and father who cared for them. I'm sure he did. And more than that, it hurts me to think if he were here and he had not deconstructed that toxic masculinity, he'd just be hurting them now. I'm not saying that his family's better off without him. That's not true. But if he were here, guaranteed he would be transferring the misogynistic, homophobic, transphobic, racist, hateful ideology that he had in his mind to his family. Not because he was angry with them necessarily, not because he was hateful towards them necessarily, though I don't know, but just because it's clear to me as I've seen him debate, as I've seen him talk, as I've seen interviews with him and shows with him, that this man had learned young to defend himself all the time. All the time his shield is up and showing other people, you can't get to me. You can't hurt me. You can't make me feel bad about myself. You can't make me feel stupid. You can't make me feel guilty. I won't feel guilty. You'll feel guilty. Let me tell you something about you. Let me tell you about you people. And all of it comes out from that moment. Is anybody actually threatening me with actual harm? No. Then why are you defensive? You don't need to defend yourself. If you're a good guy, it'll show up. If you're a good person, it'll show up. And if the people around you don't recognize when you're being a good person, you don't need them around. And we can all do better. And this is why when I talk about being able to just sit in the shit, as I tend to call it, because I'm a vulgar human being. Sometimes I just have to sit in it and tell myself this was always going to be this way. It was never going to not be this way. And, they say that this is a concept, compatibilism, that can break your brain. But I find it to be I don't find it difficult to comprehend. I mean, deep. You have to really get into it. You have to really sit in it and feel it more than think it, if that makes sense. But we really do live in a world, I assume, based on what I can see, where there is no free will. Things just happen. And your brain, your body is generating these electrochemical processes all the time. But your thoughts are those are included among those, and your feelings are included among those. And it can feel a little bit like it's gonna tear you apart on the inside, to think of that your feelings are both the environment in your brain and also the actor inside your brain. You're both things at the same time. Always in the now, making decisions, and goofy, silly person that you are, thinking that it's you, a passenger inside your head, making these decisions. You, the captain of your soul, making these decisions. And it's not true. Scientifically, it's not true. Your brain, your thoughts are the environment. Your feelings are the environment. They're also the actor. And that point where they are making those interactions, that is now. And again, I know many of you have heard me say this, but it bears repeating. The moment that I heard Sam Harris explain at Christopher Hitchens' service, if you will, with the Melbourne Atheist Convention, and he says, you think about that there's a process of time that takes for a signal to transfer from your eye to your brain and from your ear to your brain. And the amount of time lapsed between the vision of my lips moving, hitting your eye and striking your brain and being interpreted to your brain, and the signal of the audible signal of my voice coming into your ear and transferring into your brain are arriving at your brain at different times in different speeds. And yet, while I am talking and my lips are moving, you see them and perceive them as if they are happening at the same time, synchronized. That means that inside your brain, all of your life, you've had a director, or some scientists have compared it to having a press secretary, or having a whatever you want to call it. You have an interpreter inside your brain that is taking the signals around you and so seamlessly coordinating them and putting them together into your brain that you, silly goofball that you are, think that you are observing what's happening now. But really, if it's happening from your ears, if it's happening from your skin, if it's happening from your eyes, if it's happening from your nose or from your taste buds, if it's happening from somewhere in your body and being interpreted by your brain, by the time your brain understands what it is already a memory. It is a thought from the past arising in the present. But the moment where you perceive that you are both the actor inside your brain and also the environment of your brain, and that moment that you feel that it feels uncomfortable, maybe, or it feels upsetting, or maybe it feels like maybe you reject it, or maybe you totally accept it. Maybe you think, well, yeah, doesn't everybody understand that? Or whatever it may be. In that moment, that moment is now. That's the now. That's the now that's happening to you all the time. And all the time you're going through it and constantly taking in information, constantly taking in stimuli. And lo and behold, when we don't have enough of it, I don't know how many of you know this pain. When you get to the point you can get so used to the anxiety of the world that you can't relax without it. Back in the day when I used to travel a lot, when I would arrive at a hotel room, I would turn on the TV, I would turn it up loud, and I would turn it to the first infomercials I could find. Nowadays, you can hardly even find them at all. I would turn the infomercials on, and I would play them loud so that I could sleep. Because being by myself in a hotel room was so peacefully quiet that it freaked me out a little bit. And it's like my nervous system didn't know how to go from that crazy vibration down into you can just relax, Joe. I didn't know how to let go of that aggravated vibration frequency. And when I learned that was anxiety and understanding that anxiety, suddenly I came to the awareness. I came to understand what it meant to treat my insomnia. And thinking to myself, well, other people just turn the lights all off, insist on everything being quiet, put earbuds or like earplugs in or something. You put eye mask on you. Why? So you could just be shut off from the world and from all your senses. I couldn't do it. I'd freak out. I'd be like, I'd feel like I was drowning, or I'd feel like I was suffocating. And for years I couldn't sleep. I told a friend of mine recently, as a matter of fact, she just texted me while we were talking, while I've been talking here now. And she sent me a late night text saying, Joe, I hate to interrupt you. And I was like, she did wake me up. I'm like, oh, hey, what's up? It was like 2 a.m. Oh, hey, what's going on? And she's like, I can't sleep. And I don't know what to do. I'm sorry that I'm doing this now, but I just took a chance that you were up. And I said, oh, okay, cool. What's going on with you? And she explained to me what was going on. She said, and now I can't sleep. And she said, it's just anxiety, constant rolling anxiety. And I know that it's not forever, but I feel like, I said, in the moment, it feels like it's going to go on forever. It's like being high. That moment when you're high and you're like, oh, is this forever? Or is this forever? Right? Like David on After Dentist, right? David After Dentist, is that what that video is? Is this real life? Is this forever? That's what anxiety is like, right? And she asked me, she's like, you said something once to me about how you had dealt with this constantly. I said, oh yeah, there's a solid 10 years there where I don't think I got a full night's sleep one night, once, in about at least a decade. And she said, what did you do? I said, oh gosh, I tried everything. I tried pouring cold water over my eyes. I tried, tea bags over my eyes. I tried pills. I tried drinking. I tried, every different kind of mattress. I tried, sleeping on the floor. I tried sleeping with my, I tried a billion things. I said, the 2 things that helped. One, I got rid of my pillow and I rolled up a towel and put it under my neck. And it sounds silly, but as I was laying my head back, I felt like I was, in the moment, the first time that I did it, it felt like I was dangling my head off of the edge of a cliff. But the guy I learned it from, the massage therapist I'd learned it from, said that's the way it's going to feel the first time. It's going to be awkward, but trust me, it's worth it. So I stuck with the process. And I slept with that towel under my neck. That first night, I slept 8 hours in a row and woke up feeling like I'd been born anew. I said, so there's one. That's an easy one. It's practical. The other thing that I learned to do was in that moment where I thought I was going to suffocate or where I thought I'm going to die, if I allow my senses, if I allow my vibration to slow down, if I allowed for the darkness to just cover me, if I allowed the room to just descend into silence, if that tense frequency, if it were to relax, no, it's just gonna kill me. I'm gonna die. 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 I said, in that moment, you can look at that and you can feel that vibration and say, I'm afraid I'm gonna die. That's what's gonna happen here. I'm afraid because I've been so traumatized by life that I'm afraid I'm gonna die. And in that moment, I just think to myself, I would say to myself, maybe this is toxic. Maybe somebody will say this is a terrible thing to do. Don't listen to this man when he says this thing. But it worked for me. Is that I just said to my body, in my mind, my brain, and to myself, as honestly and directly as I could say, okay, then just die. Just do it. If that's what happens to me, that's what happens to me. Great. And then all of a sudden I felt this lightness on my shoulders. I said, and then I told her, and then sometimes that didn't work. In those moments, if that didn't work, then what I would do is I would visualize all of the pressure of my day on my shoulders, even while I'm laying down. Still works. And just visualize taking it off of my shoulders and putting it right next to me, like straight up against my body, but putting it right next to me in my bed with me and saying, I'm not throwing it away. I'm not letting it slip through my fingers. Just putting it right here for me, for Molly, for the kids, for my employers, for everybody's sake. I'm just putting it to the side. I'm just setting it aside for a minute. It'll still be here to pick up in the morning, but I'll be rested and be able to handle it better. And so if the first two don't work, try the other one. That's what worked for me. And then I realized that I hadn't gotten a text from her in the last 10, 15 minutes because one of those had already worked. And I bet you anything, when I was an insomniac, most days I thought to myself, a grown man doesn't have to do that. I'm a grown-up person. I shouldn't have to have little tricks to get myself to go to sleep. And it was just another one of those things about like a grown-ass man who's responsible doesn't, washes his socks and doesn't have to buy new ones. You know what? But that's not me. And number one. Number two, there are a lot of men in this world who don't sleep. There are a lot of people in this world who don't sleep. There are a lot of people in this world of every sexuality, of every gender expression and identity who cannot sleep, who have panic and anxiety attacks all the time. And it's completely and totally normal. Anxiety may be the most normal thing that human beings experience. I'll never forget the first time I read that in a book by Dr. Rollo May. And he said, people who think that they don't have anxiety generally just don't understand what it is. or maybe they have good habits for controlling it, but more likely they've just learned how to suppress it and have no idea that most of their worst problems in life and their worst habits, whether that's what you eat or what you drink or your exercise routine, whether it's your relationships with other people, whether it has to do with your relationship with technology, what most of the things, the bad habits that you have are going to come from the ways in which you are actively trying to ignore this anxiety, which is, and this is why pessimism is so valuable to me. The difference between the world as you perceive that it should be and the world that you are actually experiencing inside. The man would wax so verbose in his books, and then you get these little pearls like that. Wow. The difference between the world as you perceive it should be and the world as you perceive it inside yourself, as you actually experience it. And most people don't even, we spend most of our lives not even thinking about it. Why would you even think about it? Why would you stop and think about the difference between the world? There's something, I guarantee you right now, there's something you expect that everybody else around you is just doing naturally and just doing a bang up job at it and all the time. And that you're the only one who sucks at it. Whether it's how you do your makeup um or quieting the self-critical thoughts. That if you were to ask somebody, if you were to ask 5 people, do you ever do this thing that I do? I'm not saying you have to. I'm just suggesting. I've done it. Ask 5 people. You ever have this problem? And for me, it never fails. Within 5 people, I find at least one person who's like, "Oh, I do that all the time." I'll never forget when one of my best friends in the whole world, I've talked about on here before, contacted me and said, "Joe, how are you sleeping?" And I said, "I'm sleeping great right now." And believe you me, nobody's more surprised to hear me say that than me. He said, "Me too." He's like, I'm relieved. I was contacting you to let you know about ZQL." And I said, "What?" And he said, "ZQL, have you tried this?" I'm like, "Isn't that just Benadryl?" And he's like, "Oh, I don't know." And he like looks at me. He's like, "Oh yeah, yeah. I guess ZQL and Benadryl are the same thing. Bento, whatever it is." And I'm like, "Okay, whatever. Is it working?" And he's like, "Oh, it's changed my life." I'm like, "Hey, good for you, man." I'm like, I didn't know you were an insomniac." And he's like, "Oh, for years." He was one of my best friends in the world. I had no idea. He was experiencing exactly what I had been experiencing for years. We'd experienced it at the same time. We worked together and experienced it, and I had no idea. We don't know what we don't know in terms of all the ways in which we, as a society and as a group, as a people, and my battery's dying, so we're probably coming up to a close here, set standards for ourselves of toxic positivity that are not just not true. It'd be one thing if it just wasn't true. That's not the point. It's that they hurt us. In a world where we have plenty enough chasing after us, stop hurting yourself. Stop making yourself feel defensive. Because if you don't do it for yourself, do it for the people you love. Do it for the people around you before it's too late. And it is hard to look back and say, I'll never be able to undo that hurt that I didn't know was happening. And it's hard to realize that defensive moment that says, well, I didn't know something was. Don't have to say it now. If that's true, if that feeling, that defensive feeling that says, okay, but I am, if that, whatever came after I am, or, okay, but what you need to, if the next thing is true, you don't have to say it. That was, I'm not saying it to be, I'm not saying any of this to be braggadocious or to be, to bloviate or pontificate. I'm telling you guys things that right now that are painful for me to admit about myself, but that changed my whole outlook on life. And when I see them change somebody else's life, it just fills me with so much purpose. And I'm not very good at any of it yet. But I know that we can all do better. And if all I can do is to point a few people in the direction of people much smarter than me, I think I would have done something with a real positive impact in the world. So let me tell you a couple of names just to remind us. I cannot highly recommend enough The School of Life by Alon Alon Day. What names? This is the names part. Do it right. Alain de Botton. Boton. Alain, Alain, de Botton. I think it's Portuguese. Might be Spanish. I guess it's, yeah, it could very, I mean, those are words in Spanish. Anyways, Alain de Botton. He's English though. But the School of Life is his organization. He has some great books out there. He did, of course, he did Religion for Atheists, but he also did. I'm trying to remember this other one, but you can look up his works. He's written quite a bit, and you can also look up YouTube videos. He does great interviews. He does these interviews where he talks about how love is a skill and not a feeling. Oof. Oh man, you're not ready, friends. You're not ready. Alain de Botton. I gotta highly recommend Sam Harrison in his book Waking Up. Sam's got problems like all of us do. It's not perfect, but he doesn't have to be. Waking Up's a good one. And it's got a great audiobook with Sam narrating. And Sam's voice, I don't know if you know this, but Sam, knows about me. Anyways. I like Sam Harris's voice. I like Sam Harris. And I highly recommend getting his book, Waking Up, on audiobook. Dr. Rollo May. His audiobooks are narrated by somebody else, and his narrators are not great. But I like to listen to the audiobooks while I'm doing other things. Like if you like to listen to something while you work on something else, gardening or something, or doing chores or whatever. If you're an audiobook person, I can't recommend enough. Dr. Rollo May, Man's Search for Himself, and is it Love and Will? That is an audiobook. I think Love and Will doesn't have an audiobook. Love and Will was like his magnum opus. Is like really big work. But Man's Search for Himself blew my mind. Boy, I really wish I had off the top of my head something written by a woman. Existential Kink. Sorry to say it's well, not sorry to say, existential kink I came across recently, and it was, and I thought it was very good. Um, I did a whole series on, better understanding sexuality and anxiety. And the other one that I thought was really good, because there were a couple that I thought were just kind of okay. Unfortunately, the other one was feel it, feel it all the way. It was really good. Um, and for men, I wish more men. You have to be in the right headspace for this. Get ready for it. Um, Bell hooks, the willingness to change. Not everything the bell hooks, well, yeah. Anyways, no, I won't. I won't preface that anymore. The will to change. It made me cry. It make a grown man cry. That book. I've told the story before about there's a moment where she talks about this feminist who wrote a book about how mentions in this book about how um, women and children are just waiting around for the men in their lives to die. And in that moment, that cut straight through to my main anxiety in life. And when she explained what she meant by that, boy, it really hooks me up. Well, yeah, bell hooks hook. It really it drew me in and like put a mirror up in front of my face about how I was torturing myself with something I didn't need to, and how being responsible for the way that I treated women and the way I treated everybody around me had to do with more than just what is fair or unfair to me, or fair, or even fair or unfair to them. That fairness really wasn't even a part of it. That so many times we're tempted, maybe as human beings, but particularly I as a man, never experienced being anything else. How many times I thought, yeah, well, that's these other men in her life. It's got nothing to do with me. It's not my responsibility. That defensiveness. I didn't. What's that got to do with me? It's not my problem. Luckily, she's with me, so now she knows what it's like to be with a good guy. That's another one that I learned from Kate Kelly. She's like, "Boy, I hate good guys, nice guys." She said once, and I was like, "Excuse me? Whoa! On behalf of the nice guys." And she's like, "There you go. There it is." Well, okay, okay, cool, all right. What's wrong with us nice guys? I mean, we're a bunch of assholes somehow. And I learned. I opened up instead of getting defensive. Said, I remember very clearly this feeling, because I did feel very offended. I felt so offended. I felt so threatened when Kate Kelly posted that on her Facebook one time and said, "I just hate," and she didn't say those. Those weren't the words. I'm messing it up. I'm messing it up somewhere. And she said, "I'm just so sick and tired of nice guys." And because that's me my whole life. "Oh, Joe, you're such a nice guy." That's the thing girls say when they don't want you to ask them to the homecoming dance, by the way. "Joe, you're such a nice guy." That's not true. It's what I thought was true. It's like, oh, I guess I'm not asking her to the dance. Okay, fine. That's fine. I have Star Wars at home. I have X-Files to catch up on. Um, I'm gonna let Gillian Anderson be my winter formal date. I don't need any of these. I don't need any of you. Um, sorry, just trying to lighten the mood a little bit here while I wrap this up. Um, but I said, no, I'm not going to get defensive. I'm going to sit. I'm going to listen. and something I had learned from the emotional labor confrontation I'd had with Kate Kelly's entire Facebook following. Holy shit! I'm sorry. I am sorry. Okay, I got it. Was, if it's something you can Google, don't ask Kate to explain. Don't ask a woman to explain a thing that you can Google. Got it. Learn that one. Learn that one. Holy fuck, but the hard way. Holy shit, did I learn that one the hard way. Oh, man. If you can Google it, don't ask a woman to explain it to you. Got it. Got it. Okay. So, all right. I'm listening, though. What's wrong with us nice guys? And then started opening that can of worms. I think for a solid week there with every woman I knew. Can I ask you a question? What's wrong with nice guys? Not talking about me, just asking for a friend. I'm just gonna look off in this direction. You just tell me right here in my ear. Just what's wrong with nice guys? What's wrong with them? What's with those guys? Why are you sick of nice guys? Is everybody just sick of nice guys? What the hell's the problem? What's the deal with nice guys? And then listen and find out. So it's not about nice guys. It's about guys who think that they're nice. Thank goodness it's not about me. I actually am a nice guy. And I had a partner who laughed at me when I said that. Excuse me, you're dating me. She said, yeah. Okay. So you're dating a nice guy. Yeah. Okay, so I'm an actual nice guy, not just one of these guys who just thinks he's a nice guy. She laughed. What's that supposed to mean? She said, you actually are a nice guy, but you're very aware of it. Anyway, bell hooks, the willingness to change, or the will to change, one of those. But she tells a story that really hooked me in about a woman, this feminist, who wrote in her book. It's a little plagiarizing, but whatever. It was good. It was good information. About a woman whose father had a heart attack while he was working on his ranch, and she was there. And she called an ambulance and knew, though, from where they were, that by the time that the ambulance got there, he'd be gone. And that she held him in her arms. And grieved that was the first time that she felt in her life that she'd had permission to touch her father's body. Was while he died in her arms. The book's a lot, so be ready for that. I didn't realize at that time that what I had been looking for in books about ideation, shall we say, was in this book about masculinity by bell hooks, about learning to heal masculinity. That moment right there did more for me than reading philosophy, did far more for me than Mormonism or Christianity ever did. As a matter of fact, Christianity and Mormonism for sure made everything worse when it came to my ideation. May have caused, and in fact, directly caused a lot of it. And that one story, that one moment, that cut through to me in the core. It was a good book. Highly recommend that one. So, at the end of the day, what I find most beautiful about the Church of Korihor is that we don't claim to know the pure objective truth, especially about things that are so subjective as what makes your life meaningful. Your life is meaningful if it's meaningful to you, and you owe no explanation to anybody for it. How do I know that that's true? I don't. But when I apply it in my life gets better. When I see other people apply it in their lives get better. I'm willing to go with that. It's an ongoing experiment. I'm willing to go with that until I got something better. And it's those moments like I was telling you just a moment ago, this woman and her father, that brought up rushing to my attention exactly why philosophical pessimism appealed to me, whether it was Schopenhauer's The World's as Will and Idea. Very hard book to get through, by the way. Or the extremely difficult feelings I went through and very trying experience I had reading Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, which I still have not managed to really enjoy or get anything really productive out of, except that I hate it and obviously needed to hate it, because that was when I started searching through the internet and asking, do other people hate this damn book as much as I do? This book, it makes me so angry. It's not just that it makes me angry because it's about concentration camps and stuff. It was that this man, Viktor Frankl, I want to like him and I want to feel for him, and man lost his whole family in concentration camps. But everything he says grates on my nerves. And came to discover that there was this guy who'd written, of all places, an article in Psychology Today, which is just about, from what I understand, is one of the most pop psychology websites out there. But I read this review that said, that effectively said, if you find that you hate Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, you are not alone. And you're searching the internet. This man who is a psychologist, knew there were other people like him out there. And that I was out there. He knew I was out here like him going, why do people like this damn book? This book makes me furious. And he said, it's a really good book for a lot of people, but you are one of the people who's in a particular kind of hurt right now where you don't need to hear that shit. And you need a completely different thing. And he said, and that's why I recommend to you the work of my mentor, Dr. Rollo May. And he said, particularly Man's Search for Himself. Switch from Man's Search for Meaning to Man's Search for Himself, which, of course, as you can tell, probably from the title, Man's Search for Himself is an answer to Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And Frankl, and as I understand it, well, Frankl and May were colleagues, but I think they actually were even friends. And May wrote this book. Rollo May wrote this book specifically because he said, there's a whole category of people out there. There's a whole category of people out there that this whole idea, really the whole premise of logotherapy, of talk therapy, that whole thing is just going to trigger them worse. Britt Hartley does a thing about this. Also, one of her no nonsense spirituality videos about how, especially people with autism, sometimes, and I think was it that people with autism or people who are atheists? I think it was both. I think it was both. It was one of those. How there are some people with an existential crisis, constant existential crisis, for whom it's actually arguable that therapy will make them worse. And that therapy doesn't work for everybody. There are some people for whom talk therapy is just never going to work. Or if talk therapy works, it's going to have to be in conjunction with some kind of spiritual directorship. That may seem self-serving because she is a spiritual director, but she said but she was saying something important there. I think she was saying, and that's crucial right now to understand, because so many people in our society, like me and like others, have given up on God, and so we have no spiritual directorship, or think that there is no spiritual direction um, available to us, and have no interest in it, don't want to pursue it. We don't think, but we know something's missing, and we know that we need help. And for those people, she says, I highly recommend that you find a spiritual director, an atheist spiritual director, if you can, who can guide you through the process of setting up your discovery outside of these channels. And yes, a lot of times it means going to a life coach instead of an actual therapist. That doesn't mean that therapy doesn't work. It doesn't mean that their process, that these life coaches or spiritual directors are going to have a process that's better than therapy. It's that if you can't make therapy work for you, it's probably because you have this existential direction that you need in life that they're not prepared for. Rollo May, I started to ask around about this after I read that article by this psychotherapist about Rollo May. Rollo May became known as the father of American existential psychotherapy. Yeah. What the hell does that mean? Some kind of weird modality, some kind of strange thing. I actually read May's books, and it was so simple. It was so simple. And I was like, is that really all that it is? Because I started asking around. I'm like, do you know anybody who trained in existential psychotherapy? And found that a lot of therapists would tell me that's pretty much basic. Like everybody has to take a course in it or something, or there's like a part of one of the main courses where they just learn about existential psychotherapy. And I'd be like, no, this is a special thing. It has to do with Dr. May and blah, blah, blah. And then I actually read Dr. May's books, and it's like, no, basically his case is, if you're going to take up the practice of therapy, of practicing psychotherapy, you should read the existentialists, especially Schopenhauer. And I think he said Spinoza, Nietzsche, and Camus. Trying to think of who else he had mentioned, but those were the main ones. And I'm missing a big one in there somewhere. Anyway, and he said, if you don't understand those things, you're going to find there are some clients that need help, and you're not going to be able to help them. So there's some patients that need something that you're just not going to get out of basic talk therapy. And these days, there are a lot of life coaches who just learn how to do that, and spiritual directors who try to specialize in that very thing. And so I would never encourage somebody to do life coaching instead of therapy. At least officially, I wouldn't do it. If you need therapy, you need therapy. But there are people for whom the road to successful therapy may reside first through some channel outside of it. And as long as it's not some pseudoscientific bullshit like pray the gay away therapy, or porn addiction recovery therapy, or any of these BS protocols out there, spiritual protocols about, I don't know. I don't want to limit too much about what people, I don't want to be too discouraging, because some people do get something out of these spiritual healer things, energy healing and things like that. And, do what you want to do. I mean, try, as long as nobody's talking about sacrificing, babies to Satan or something, I've been delving pretty deep into some weird and wild stuff that, in the Ken Krog thing. By the way, the reason why I went today to Fairview and checked in on Laura Amy, I'm going to be publishing that footage a little bit later. I'll try to do it tonight, but I might have to crash when I get back to St. George. um, was I went to Spring City. I'm following up on this Ken Krog story. I went to this sleepy little town just a few miles that away, right there. And this adorable little artistic town. And it was refreshing. It was beautiful. And here's this city where this powerful multimillionaire, billionaire, I think, is making life for all of his neighbors a living hell, trying to convince them that this little Mormon couple out there are the leaders of the LDS Church of Satan and that they've sacrificed babies in the pottery kiln. I just went and filmed in front of their pottery kiln. I didn't bother them today. I mean, it is Sunday after all. But I'm like, this is the place. This is the place where they sacrifice people to the devil. Okay, Ken Krog, whatever, dude. It keeps coming up, Krog. I'll tell you what. Anyway, I want you guys to know that I don't claim to have all the answers. And boy, is it a huge relief to me to think I don't have to. But I can tell you this: compartmentalizing your life with the anticipation that you'll be disappointed may seem like the weirdest advice, but it can be a game changer. When you start every day of your life with enough optimism, try to give your. I was listening today to Alon Dibaton, and he was talking about today a lot of people who work in meditation and especially secular Buddhists will say if you meditate in the morning to premeditate and that it makes it more effective, that you should lie in bed before you get going in the morning and think hopeful, practical thoughts and try actively to fill your mind with things to meditate about for the day and try and set it up. And I mean, I'm gonna try it. I hope you guys will too, and that you'll get something useful and productive out of that. But he talks about, every day, look forward to being disappointed with yourself at the end of the day. It sounds as hard as it sounds, as strange as that sounds. That whether it's going to be a good day, whether it's going to be a bad day, it just is. It just is. But that you're going to start every day believing and wanting to believe that you're going to get something good and productive done, whether that's in terms of productivity or improving yourself and working on yourself, and that you are going to fail at it. But you're going to fail on purpose. You're going to fail. This is me putting my terminology there, right? You're going to fail forward. You're going to fail because life sucks and you kind of suck, and that's just kind of the way you are. That's just kind of the way things are. And you really shouldn't have ever expected differently because you are just a human being. And frankly, you don't give yourself enough credit. It's one of your worst flaws. Whoever you are out there, and I know some of you, and I'm sorry that I went so long today, but I just can't seem to sermonize for less than 2 hours anymore. I'm going to tell you, though, if you, my friend out there, if you are like me, a person who has that constant inner critic telling you you're not good enough, telling you should shut up, nobody wants to listen to you, telling you that you're never going to get this done, you're never going to get better at this, this is just the way you are, and everything. I want to just add in my voice in with that inner critic. Okay, just put this voice in there in that box with it. Okay, yeah, man, you suck. All right, you suck. You know what the worst part about you? Oh, irritates me to no end about you. You know what irritates me about you? You don't give yourself enough credit. It's not that one in there. If you were a narcissist, and I think they do exist, though there is some question. If you were a psychopath, you wouldn't be worried about these things. If you were toxic, irrevocably toxic, if you were abusive to the extent that you cannot possibly do better in life, you wouldn't be sitting here worried about it. Those people, they exist. I'm convinced. I've met enough people, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't think so far on this thing. On this thing, there are people who are just beyond hope. And I feel so badly for those people. I've worried so long that I was one of those people. And I know you do. I know you probably have too. But let me tell you something. Those people don't ever think about this. Or if they do, they never put in the effort to try to change. And that's all we can do. At the end of the day, you're going to suck at it. Try to remember that you're new to it, and nobody is great at something that they're new to. Amen. Wish I had a hymn to close with you guys. I had an angry hymn I wrote today. I'll probably publish it later on the website, but maybe not on YouTube. It's a little vulgar. I was really angry, but I got it out of my system, as you can tell. Flash bright, my friends. Thank you so much for being here. And I'll try to post that Laura Amy footage a little bit later. I think some of you have been following the Ted Bundy story. We'll find it really good. All right, guys.